The rain lashed down in relentless sheets, turning the rural road into a dark, treacherous river. Lisa gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white, as she navigated the winding path leading to her family's cabin. The storm had caught her off guard, and now, with visibility reduced to a few feet, she was driving cautiously but with increasing anxiety. As she rounded a bend, her headlights illuminated a figure standing by the roadside, drenched and forlorn. Lisa's heart skipped a beat. It was unusual to see anyone out here in such a storm, and even more unusual to see someone standing alone in the rain. She slowed down, hesitating for a moment before rolling down her window. "Need a ride?" she called out, trying to keep her voice steady. The figure moved closer, revealing a young woman with a pale, anxious face. "Yes, please," the woman said, her voice barely more than a whisper against the backdrop of the storm. Lisa unlocked the passenger door, and the woman climbed in, dripping water onto the seat. The interior of the car grew colder as the woman settled in, her wet clothes leaving puddles on the upholstery. "Where are you headed?" Lisa asked, trying to make conversation to ease the growing unease in her stomach. "Just a little ways down the road," the woman replied, her gaze fixed on the rain-splattered window. "I'm Emily." Lisa nodded, trying to shake off the sense of discomfort. She glanced at Emily, who seemed lost in her thoughts, her expression distant and unsettling. The rain pounded harder, and the car's headlights barely cut through the darkness. As they drove, Lisa noticed that Emily was strangely silent, her gaze unblinking. The road ahead seemed to stretch endlessly, and Lisa's anxiety grew with each mile. Emily's stillness was almost eerie, and Lisa felt an increasing urge to break the silence. "Do you know where exactly you're going?" Lisa asked, her voice shaking slightly. "Just up the road," Emily repeated, her voice flat and emotionless. Lisa's unease deepened. The storm had grown even fiercer, and the road was becoming more difficult to navigate. Suddenly, Emily pointed to a narrow dirt road on the right. "This is it," Emily said. Lisa turned onto the dirt road, which quickly became less navigable. The trees seemed to close in around them, the darkness pressing against the car. She glanced at Emily, who was now staring straight ahead, her face pale in the dim light. "Are you sure this is the right place?" Lisa asked, her voice tinged with fear. Emily didn't respond. Lisa slowed the car, the tires struggling on the muddy road. She stopped the car and turned to Emily, but the seat was empty. Panic surged through her as she looked around the car, but Emily was nowhere to be found. Lisa stumbled out into the rain, her heart pounding in her chest. She glanced around, seeing nothing but darkness and the relentless downpour. She looked back at the car and saw a small, weathered sign at the edge of the road. It read, "Emily's Rest." Chilled to the bone, Lisa approached the sign, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Beyond the sign was an overgrown cemetery, its headstones weathered and worn. Lisa's eyes widened as she read the name on one of the headstones, Emily. Lisa raced back to her car, her hands trembling as she fumbled with the keys. She drove away as fast as she could, the stormy night and the chilling encounter leaving her deeply shaken. When she finally reached the cabin, she vowed never to drive that road again. Mark had always prided himself on being a seasoned driver, but tonight's storm tested his resolve. The rain came down in relentless sheets, and the highway was barely visible. He had been driving for hours, hoping to make it home before midnight, but the storm seemed to grow worse with each passing mile. As he drove, he noticed a pair of headlights in his rearview mirror. The vehicle was large, its high beams blinding through the torrential rain. Mark frowned, trying to make out the vehicle's details, but the visibility was too poor. The truck roared up behind him, its horn blaring aggressively. Mark's heart raced as he tried to stay calm, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The truck's headlights grew brighter, almost seeming to encase him in an oppressive glow. Mark sped up, hoping to put some distance between himself and the aggressive driver. But the truck stayed on his tail, the driver clearly intent on not letting him go. The truck swerved erratically, its high beams flashing on and off, and its horn blaring incessantly. Mark's nerves were frayed, and he felt a growing sense of desperation. He searched for a place to pull over, but the road was narrow and treacherous. Finally, he spotted a small pull-off area and maneuvered his car onto it, hoping the truck would pass by. But the truck didn't pass. Instead, it stopped behind him, its headlights shining through the rain. Mark glanced nervously in his rearview mirror, seeing the figure of a man get out of the truck. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, his face obscured by the hood of his rain-soaked jacket. Mark's fear surged. He locked the doors and grabbed his phone, but there was no signal. The man approached the car, his shadow looming larger and more menacing in the rain-soaked light. Mark's mind raced with thoughts of escape, but he was paralyzed by fear. The man reached the driver's side window and tapped on it. Mark rolled down the window just a crack, trying to keep his voice steady. "What do you want?" "Need some help?" the man asked, his voice low and gravelly. Mark shook his head, his throat dry. "No, I'm fine." The man's expression remained inscrutable, but his gaze was intense and unsettling. "You shouldn't be out here alone. It's not safe." Mark's fear turned to desperation. He quickly rolled up the window and started the engine, his tires spinning on the wet ground as he sped away. The truck followed, but it didn't stay with him for long. As Mark drove further into the storm, the truck's headlights disappeared, leaving him alone in the darkness. When he finally reached the safety of a well-lit rest stop, he pulled over and took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. He relayed the encounter to the rest stop's clerk, who seemed familiar with the story. "Sounds like you had a run-in with the ghost trucker," the clerk said, his voice grim. "There's a local legend about a trucker who died in a crash on this road. They say his ghost still haunts it, warning travelers to stay away." Mark's blood ran cold. He had narrowly escaped something beyond his understanding. As he continued his journey home, the memory of the phantom trucker lingered, a haunting reminder of the dangers lurking on rainy, desolate roads. Jenna had been driving for hours, the rain hammering against her windshield. She had left the city late and was now on a deserted highway, the storm making the journey feel even longer. The gas gauge hovered dangerously close to empty, and she was growing increasingly anxious about finding a place to refuel. As the rain intensified, she spotted a flickering neon sign up ahead. The sign read, "Open 24 hours," and she felt a wave of relief. She pulled into the parking lot of a small, run-down gas station, the canopy over the pumps sagging under the weight of the rain. Jenna got out of the car, the rain instantly soaking her clothes. She hurried to the pump, trying to ignore the growing sense of unease. The gas station looked deserted, its windows dark and the lights inside flickering intermittently. She filled her tank and headed inside to pay. The interior was dimly lit, with dusty shelves and old, faded advertisements on the walls. The only sound was the steady hum of the fluorescent lights. Jenna approached the counter, where an elderly man with a weathered face sat behind the register. "Just gas," Jenna said, handing over her credit card. The man nodded, his eyes distant and unwelcoming. As he processed the payment, Jenna noticed a bulletin board on the wall, covered in old missing person posters and newspaper clippings. A chill ran down her spine as she scanned the names and faces, each one a reminder of the area's dark history. "Bad night to be out," the old man said, his voice low and gravelly. "Yeah," Jenna agreed, trying to sound casual. "I didn't expect the storm to get this bad." The man's eyes seemed to darken. "This road's not safe at night. Too many people go missing. They say the storm brings out the worst." Jenna's unease grew, and she quickly grabbed her receipt and headed back to her car. As she approached, she glanced around, noticing a figure standing at the edge of the canopy. The figure was a woman, her face obscured by shadows and the rain. Jenna's heart raced as she fumbled with her keys, her gaze locked on the woman. The figure didn't move, just stood there, staring at her with an intensity that made Jenna's skin crawl. She got into her car and locked the doors, her hands shaking as she started the engine. The woman remained standing there, her gaze fixed on Jenna. Jenna drove away, her heart pounding as she glanced in the rearview mirror. The woman was still there, standing in the rain, watching her disappear into the storm. When Jenna reached home, she turned on the news, and a report about a missing woman caught her attention. The description matched the figure she had seen at the gas station. The news anchor spoke of an unsolved case involving a woman who had disappeared near that very gas station years ago. The sight of the lonely gas station and the haunting image of the woman stayed with Jenna. Every rainy night, she remembered the figure standing in the storm, a chilling reminder of the unknown horrors that can lurk in the darkness,